Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Samantha Arthur. I'm Deputy Secretary for Water at the California Natural Resources Agency. And I'm standing in today as Chair of the Commission on behalf of our usual Chair, Secretary Wade Crowfoot, and also Vice Chair Assemblyman James Gallagher, both of whom had conflicts today, and they do send their regrets for missing this meeting. Welcome to the 20th meeting of the Oroville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission. Great to be with you all this morning, and as usual, we'll have 2 hours for the meeting, and we plan to conclude at noon. The meeting will be recorded and posted to the Commission website. Members of the public will be muted until the public comment period. At that time, the web host will allow you to unmute to provide verbal comment. And you can also submit public comments in the Q&A button on your Zoom application, should be at the bottom of your screen. Those will be read aloud during the public comment period. Looking ahead, our next meeting will be held in the fall, and we're currently planning to hold the meeting in person in Oroville on a Friday morning, and then we'll invite interested commissioners to participate in an afternoon floating classroom tour. This is where DWR scientists are going to take us out on the Feather River to learn about Chinook salmon, their habitat, and their life cycle. So we're very excited about this opportunity and hope that many of the commissioners will be able to join us in October. Before we begin, I'm going to turn it over to Tara Alpa, our meeting planner from Kearns and West, to do a quick roll call of all of the commissioners.
Good morning, everyone. When I call your name, please indicate you're present. If you're stepping in for someone on my list, please state your name clearly for the record. So we'll start with California Natural Resources Agency, Secretary Crowfoot's designee, Deputy Secretary Arthur.
Here.
Assemblymember Gallagher's designee, Julia Cordy. Thank you. Senator Dolly's designee, Bruce Ross.
Good morning.
Perfect. Department of Water Resources Director Namath's designee, Deputy Director John Yarborough.
Here.
Thank you. Office of Emergency Services Director Ward's designee, Deputy Director Nazura.
Here.
Thank you. Department of Parks and Recreation Director Quintero's designee, District Public Safety Chief Wright.
I'm here. Good morning.
California Highway Patrol Commander's designee, Lieutenant Patrick Leach.
Here.
Thank you. City of Oroville Mayor Pittman.
Present.
Thank you. City of Oroville Vice Mayor Smith. Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Connolly.
I'm here.
Thank you. Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
I'm here, present.
Thank you. Butte County Board of Supervisors appointee, Commissioner Bateman.
I'm here.
Thank you. Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Stevens.
Here.
Thank you. Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Boone.
Here.
Great, thank you. Yuba County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Furr. Yuba County Board of Supervisors appointee, OES Manager Marin. Butte County Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Beller.
I am here.
Thank you. Sutter County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Lycan. Yuba County Sheriff's Office, Operations Captain Lieberger.
I'm here. Good morning.
Thank you. We have reached a quorum of 15 commissioners, so thank you everyone and welcome.
Thanks so much, Tara. Here we go, next slide. All right, well, thank you all so much for being here and for your continued participation in the commission. I want to start with a recent example of the value of the discussions here. Based on discussions in this venue about the city of Oroville's levy, state partners on the commission were able to advocate for its inclusion in the Army Corps of Engineers one-time levy screening program. Since our last meeting, the Corps was on site to evaluate the levee's relative risk compared to other nationwide levees and potential remediation needs. A report on those findings from the Army Corps of Engineers and any recommendations will be forthcoming. The Secretary and I want to thank you all for your commitment in continuing to proactively address the region's concerns with the flood management system and your willingness to work across jurisdictions in partnership with the state and federal agencies to do so. Before we get into the agenda, I want to acknowledge that we're joined today by Assemblyman Gallagher's District Director, Julia Cordy, and Senator Dolly's Press Secretary, Bruce Ross. Thank you so much, Julia and Bruce, for joining the commission and ensuring that the Assemblyman and the Senator remain up to date on the commission's discussions. Mayor Pittman, I see your hand up. I'm going to go over a little bit of the agenda today and then would love to call on you particularly about the levy visit. Look forward to your comments on that. So today we're looking forward to delving further into several of the topics that the group has explored in the past. These follow-up presentations were selected based on requests in those meetings, as well as subsequent input from commission members. First, we'll give a short update describing progress on the second triannual Oroville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission legislative report. This will cover meetings held between 2022 and the end of this year. Our second and third presentations will focus on our efforts to improve forecasting ability to decrease flood risk to downstream communities. We'll welcome back Dr. Marty Ralph from the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at the Scripps Institution at UC San Diego to provide an overview of the final viability assessment for Yuba Feather Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FERO. The advancements in research on atmospheric rivers, snowpack, and storm runoff forecasting documented in this report will be important tools for the Army Corps to consider to inform the Water Control Manual update. Then we'll have Department of Water Resources Manager of the River Forecasting Unit, Bibek Joshi, will speak about the California-Nevada River Forecast Center's forecasting of inflow to California reservoirs and rivers. These inflow forecasts are essential to DWR's operational decisions at Oroville. So we hope both of these presentations will help prepare our commissioners and other interested members of the public to participate meaningfully in the Corps' upcoming public process to provide input on the Water Control Manual. As always, our meeting will end with a public comment period where I invite members of the community to make any remarks they would like to share. Before we dive into presentations, I actually want to turn it over to Deputy Director of the State Water Project, John Yarborough, who's representing the California Department of Water Resources today on behalf of the director. And John will talk more, and then we'll go to commissioners, and we'll invite you, Mayor Pittman, to provide comments. Looking forward to hearing from you. I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Director Yarborough.
Well, thank you, Deputy Secretary. And first, I'd like to thank Mayor Pittman for his participation. As the Deputy Secretary mentioned, we had this U.S. Army Corps one-time levy screening for the city of Oroville levy, and what I heard from our DWR team is that really had a lot of great leadership from the mayor and the team from the city that provided some really helpful information to the Army Corps throughout this entire two-day process. And also wanted to thank Commissioner Bateman, who also joined the city, the Army Corps, the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, and DWR levy inspectors as they walked this entire levy system. All of this two-day effort that the Army Corps is doing, it's going into this assessment. The Army Corps is going to be putting that into an assessment, a report, and then they have offered to come to this commission and report out once that report's ready. And again, the goal of this effort, the goal of this assessment is to help us all better understand what the condition of this levee is, and then identify what actions might be done to improve its performance in the future. But I was going to pause here, and I don't know, Mayor Pittman or Commissioner Bateman, if you had any comments about that two-day effort. Oh, Mayor Pittman, looks like you're still muted.
There we go. Yeah, John, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the Army Corps, but not only them, but the DWR staff that attended, the contractors and SBUTCO, and our city engineers all had a great learning experience along with our city administrator. I think the value here is one that we didn't realize how big a deal a levy is. And I think in the future, once we see the report, the city will probably be assigning or creating a position as levy manager for our particular levy, because it's obviously critical for the natural drainage. But when we do have a high flow, to deal with all the other issues and penetrations. And I was very impressed with the detail that the Army Corps went through. I mean, every potential erosion spot, rodent hole, all kinds of things. So I did get the opportunity to sit with them for the 2 days, and it was a great experience. The funny thing is nobody knew what that levee was called, but the Army Corps had called it Levee 51 for whatever reason. So we were able to change the name to Oroville, California, Levee 1. And that'll be that way in the national database. And I suggest that to all of our other folks downstream that have to take care of levees, is to make sure you identify your levee in that database so it fits your need. And the reason we put the Oroville, California is we're very commonly confused with Oroville, Washington, quite a bit. And I just put the California part on there just so we have it located. But again, I want to appreciate all the staff that came and helped. Certainly is a valuable asset to our community, but also the entire downriver stream effects of high water flows that weren't planned for against the historical part of the levee that Oroville has. So I just want to put a big thank you out there to everybody. And I think, as Samantha mentioned, this is a huge value to this whole body process to connect with those folks that might come in and help us out down the line to improve the safety and security of all our communities. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. And then the other topic I wanted to touch on in my opening comments here did want to say a few words about the recently implemented golden mussel inspection program that we had at Lake Oroville. And for those of you who don't know, the golden mussel is an invasive species that is becoming a really large issue for water systems throughout the state. So Lake Oroville is relatively low in calcium, the water. And this is important because as the state has had other invasive mussels, this low calcium up at Oroville has kept those mussels out, and so it hasn't been a problem so far. Unfortunately, this new species, the golden mussel, can thrive in a much wider range of environments, and really do believe that if given the opportunity, it would thrive in Lake Oroville. And the problem with these mussels is they all grow on top of each other, and they will clog up pipes and clog up different mechanical equipment. They're really bad for boats, for particularly houseboats, for recreation. It has huge negative impacts if we are to get an infestation in Lake Oroville. And so this is why, as this threat became known, we quickly pulled together a boat inspection program. And our goal here really is to keep this invasive mussel out of Lake Oroville while still providing for a great recreation experience at the lake, especially this year where we're blessed to have a full lake going through the Memorial Day weekend. I recognize that doing a boat inspection, that this is really inconvenient for boaters and recreation users at Lake Oroville. So I really want to thank boaters for their patience of going through these inspections. Also really want to thank the local agencies, particularly those on the call here today, for their help in implementing this inspection program. And then also the area's elected officials that really helped get the word out about what the process was for inspection, and resulted in really a much smoother process, particularly on that, on Memorial Day weekend. Through this effort so far, we've inspected, just through the first 2 weeks, over 2,000 watercraft. We decontaminated almost 600 vehicles. And importantly, we did find golden mussels on a boat that was about to launch into Lake Oroville. Unfortunately, we found those. We were able to stop the boat, get it decontaminated, and then eventually it was able to launch in the lake. So, very much a real concern, a real potential for these mussels getting into Lake Oroville. So again, just wanted to thank all the different agencies for their cooperation. And I was going to pause here. I didn't know if there were any comments from any of the different agencies or the offices of the elected officials that participated in this effort. Yeah, Supervisor Connolly.
Sorry, I had difficulty unmuting. I've had a few complaints from local constituents that we need at least another place to carry out this effort. I mean, it's very inconvenient for them to be up the lake and then have to drive all the way out to where it's set up. And so I just want to pass that on. And I understand the excuse, there's not enough money. And, you know, my attitude about that is this generates billions of dollars for the state of California. Maybe we ought to find a little more money and make it more convenient for the locals and the tourists. Thank you. I'm passing on the message.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor.
I see Bruce with his hand up. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, there, obviously it's a new activity and it was stood up fairly quickly. I think everyone agrees, like, hopefully this isn't, the last step. Some of the stuff people talked about having coordination among different lakes and maybe some better coordination among different operators, Yuba Water and NID, they're all and PG&E are all kind of doing slightly different things. And it has been, I think there's been some concerns that it's difficult for the boating community to understand what the rules are and where they're going, and it, some more consistency and about what are the best practices could be helpful. And I don't know what kind of coordination would look like on that going forward. But I really appreciated the communication about this. There was certainly some heartburn early on, and I appreciate all the work that you did where I was done to try and make it as smooth as possible, recognizing that that work is not done.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, and this did get stood up quickly, and then also we have adjusted through time here. So we did get feedback on hours and what hours would be most helpful and convenient. So we were able to make adjustments. And then also, Supervisor, to your point on getting the locations right, the number of locations, that's something that we are continuing to adjust as we get that feedback. And then yes, the goal is really as much reciprocity with other lakes as we can. So we've been working with PG&E and Yuba Water Agency to figure out what that looks like here. So continuing to evolve this program as we go through the summer and into the future. Again, with the goals of keeping the mussels out of the reservoir, but also really trying to keep a good recreation experience. So trying to find the right balance between those two goals.
Thanks, Deputy Director. I see one more hand up here from Supervisor Boone. Let's see, we can't hear you yet. Might need to try. There we go. Yeah, I'm sorry, there's a lot of feedback there, so we weren't hearing you clearly.
Yeah, there's a lot of distortion, Supervisor Boone. I'm not sure what the system is you're using, but completely inaudible at this point.
Let's see if we can come back again, Supervisor Boone. If you can, try a little troubleshooting, and we'll come back again kind of before we head into presentations. Bruce, did you have an additional comment, or was that from before?
Yeah, I did pop it back up. John, regarding reciprocity, are there particular snags to be worked out in terms of developing that? I guess what are the, briefly, without wanting to hijack the meeting about this, I guess what would that look like, and what are some of the steps that would need to be taken going forward?
Yeah, so we're have been in discussions with Yuba Water and then also PG&E. PG&E is a little bit, I'd say, not as far along as where we are, and so we're need to get them a little further along before we'd be able to then have a common program. We're, I think, closest with Yuba Water, and the idea would be, like right now with Lake Oroville, you do the inspection, you go in the lake, we're able to tag the boats as they come out of the lake. So if you stay in Lake Oroville, we don't have to reinspect. The goal would be that that same tag would work in both Yuba Water's lakes and Oroville, so you could boat in that area, boat at different lakes in that region there without having to worry about reinspecting. And we think that would improve the experience, but also maintain that protection for the infrastructure.
Appreciate your work continuing to try and iron that out. Thank you.
I think the last point I wanted to make is just, again, it's great seeing a full lake, and this is the third time. We have it 3 years in a row we're able to get a full lake, and just great for a number of reasons, for water supply, for recreation, just a host of reasons. I know I'm happier when the lake is full. Does get me thinking about next year and wondering what we're going to see, because the next flood, the next drought is right around the corner. So I think that's just a good setup for our presentations today, as we're going to get into forecasting around the FIRO topic, the forecast informed reservoir operations topic that this commission's been following closely. Also about the work at the California Nevada River forecast. That's a key input into Lake Oroville operations. So really looking forward to these presentations. Good to be here with this group on our 20th meeting. And so with that, I'll hand it back to you, Deputy Secretary.
Thanks so much, Deputy Director Yarbrough. Appreciate it. Before we head into our presentations for today, I do want to take a moment and invite any commissioners to share relevant updates for the group for their fellow commissioners. And Supervisor Boone, I'm happy to go back to you to try again with your audio. You might need to move closer or try a different computer, but we can try you first. Go ahead.
It's still unstable now. Can you hear me?
No, I'm sorry. There's just so much distortion on it. So I think in the meantime, if you can either call in on your phone might be a good solution, or try a kind of a different setup in the meantime, and then happy to come back to you.
So,
Are there other?
sorry. So Supervisor Boone, if you do want to switch to your phone on the Zoom platform, on the audio button, there's a little arrow. If you click that little arrow, there is an option to switch to phone audio, and it'll give you the option to call your phone if you'd like.
Thanks, James. Okay, other commissioners, any announcements or updates to share with your fellow commissioners? Okay, let's head into our agenda. So as usual, after the March meeting, you all received an updated action item tracker that contained both resolved items and ones that emerged from the meeting 19. So we'll do the same today in this meeting 20, and we will invite you all to review the draft action item tracker and provide any suggested feedback or edits in preparation for the following meeting, meeting 21. So with that, let's begin our presentations, and I'm going to turn it over to Tara Elpott at Kearns and West, who will describe the progress on drafting our next triennial legislative report since the commission update. And I do want to note that we will be sending an outline to commissioners after this, and that will be a good opportunity for more kind of detailed feedback than we may have time for today. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. James, if you want to pull up the slides. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present on the status of the Triennial Commission Report, which will be covering late 2022 through 2025. And if you want to see the first report, that is available on our website. James, do we have the slides up and I'm not seeing them?
Did the slides come down? Sorry.
They did. They came down for us, James, if you could put them back up. And we're on that legislative report slide.
Yeah, the one with the timeline. Yeah,
Yep.
Next slide. Okay, so this should look familiar, hopefully. As we discussed in the March meeting, we're starting the process to develop the second commission report in accordance with the legislatively mandated schedule of every 3 years. We're aiming to finalize the next report by the end of this year or early 2026. So the green circle is where we are in this process. At this meeting, we're introducing our report outline to you all. And the full outline was included in an email sent to you by the Deputy Secretary earlier this week, and we will recirculate it after the meeting. And after the meeting, we'll solicit any written feedback you'd like to provide. So at the beginning of June, the Deputy Secretary and I met with two of your fellow commission representatives, Mayor Pittman and Julia Cordy from Assemblyman Gallagher's office, to walk them through the outline and get a bit more detailed input. We really appreciate their willingness to spend extra time providing guidance on this product. They, along with Bruce Ross from Senator Dolly's office, will continue to give us input at each stage of the process so that we can refine the report product in advance of sharing it with you for your feedback at each of those stages. So next slide. So our request of you after this meeting is to review the outline, provide any feedback you have on report organization, proposed content, and any reflections you have on OCAC accomplishments or lessons learned from the past 3 years, and to send it to the Deputy Secretary by Wednesday, July 9th, so that then we can move on to the start of actual drafting. So next slide, please. As instructed by the legislature in the OCAC founding statute, SB 955, the report must cover the 4 areas that are shown on the screen. In the first report, we organized the document's content exactly according to these topics, but we found that that approach made it a little difficult to tell a coherent story, and the end product felt a little disjointed and just not necessarily as layperson friendly as it could be. So next slide. With that in mind, we've tried to develop the outline for the second report with the goals that are on the screen here. That we will cover the content mandated by the legislation, that will summarize the commission's last 3 years of work, that we will reflect on any progress or lessons learned by the commission, and that ultimately will produce a report that's a useful reference for members of the public and for the legislature. So next slide. So on the screen here, I know this is really small. On the left is a screenshot of the outline document you've received, and on the right is a condensed version of the outline. And what I'd really like to focus you on is that bullet towards the bottom that says report narrative. We've identified 3 themes that we think characterize all the presentations that have come before the commission in the past 3 years. So those being dam safety planning with a focus on infrastructure, flood management with a focus on forecasting and operations, and flood and emergency preparedness and operations. We think that these 3 topic areas, plus an appendix that provides a register of all the communications between the department and CNRA and commissioners, cover all 4 topics mandated by the legislation, but do so in a way that better conveys the commission's priorities and interests in this 3-year period. And so within each topic, we will pull content from the specific related meeting summaries to describe what the commission learned. Next slide, please. Okay, so we had a really helpful conversation with Julia and the mayor about the report. Some of the reflections they shared that we tried to incorporate into the latest draft of the outline that was shared with you are clearly describing the scope of the commission, making sure that the report narrative clearly identifies progress in the form of actions taken over this 3-year period, whether that's actions in the form of work, collaboration, planning, calling those out. And for more technical information, introducing the topics in the report to orient the public and legislators to the subject matter before diving into more of the technical minutia that you all have gotten acquainted with in these presentations, including pictures and maps to orient and engage the reader. And then for accomplishments, they suggested that we stress the improved communication between the state and parties throughout the Feather watershed, And for improvements, they suggested we consider ways to give the public more time to ask questions and engage at these meetings. So this is the close of my presentation. We really hope you'll review the outline and send us any feedback to the Deputy Secretary by July 9th. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Tara. Appreciate it. Before we start on our next topic, I do just want to check with commissioners if you have any high-level questions or feedback on this agenda item. Okay, well then we look forward to receiving your more detailed feedback in the document that we've circulated, and look forward to those comments. So we will start with our next presentation. So here we go. Perfect, James. Thanks. Excited to welcome back Dr. Marty Ralph, who's director of the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. He was with us in fall of 2023, sharing preliminary results from the draft viability assessment for forecast-informed reservoir operations, or FIRO, a joint research effort supported by his team at Scripps, as well as federal, state, and local water agencies. At this point, the FIRO team has released their final report, and so we have Dr. Ralph back here to share what they learned and how it could be applied to improve operations for public safety at Oroville. For the state, supporting this research and development study has been part of the effort to be at the cutting edge of advances around forecasting science, which we believe will enable us to better manage floods and improve public safety outcomes, and to provide a more reliable water supply in times of this increased weather volatility that we're experiencing. So we're excited that this new research is available for the Army Corps to consider integrating into the Water Control Manual. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Ralph to tell us more.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sounds great.
Great. Thank you for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to share these results from a multi-year study involving quite a few folks in operations and in research, both in terms of forecasting and water management. So let's go ahead. First, I'll go through a few sort of definitions and basics. What is FIRO, Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, and some people call it FIRO. If you're from the Southeast, I lived in Florida for a while, that comes more naturally. Doesn't matter, either way it works. FIRO's, and we have a formal definition in the American Meteorological Society. FIRO is a reservoir operation strategy that better informs decisions to retain or release water by integrating additional flexibility in operations policies and rules with enhanced monitoring and improved weather and water forecasts. I want to highlight that it is led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There's a program, the FIRO program, managed by Dr. Carrie Talbot, and I serve as a senior scientist. Go ahead. And then what is a FIRO viability assessment? That is an effort that's led by a group you see on the right-hand side here, the folks at the time who were leading our Yuba Feather FIRO steering committee, including myself, scientist, and Joe Forbes at the Army Corps of Engineers, Molly White at DWR, John James from Yuba Water, Carrie Talbot on the right from Army Corps of Engineers, and John Lehi at the time from DWR. So viability assessment it's a research process, really. It's like a sandbox where we try out some ideas hypothetically and evaluate whether the skill of the streamflow forecast in a region, including the storms that produce that extreme precipitation and that create floods there, if that skill is adequate to be used at a specific reservoir or set of reservoirs to achieve desired outcomes for flood risk management, water availability enhancement, or environmental goals. Go ahead. What is a FIRO final viability assessment? This is the report at the end of the study. And you can see the cover page on the right there. And this is where our conclusions are presented. It includes an executive summary at the beginning and then a lot of nitty-gritty details through a very extensive technical report supporting it. And this conclusion is regarding whether forecast skill is adequate for use of FIRO at a given dam, including the impacts on flood risk management, water availability, and other goals, specific recommendations about how FERO could potentially be implemented at the dams. Then that represents feed input or into a water control manual update, which is a different stage outside FERO. And then description of the analysis methods and technical results. Please go ahead. So we have now, as a program, we started the program about 2015, and our first reservoir we worked on was Lake Mendocino on the Russian River, and that final viability assessment was completed in 2020. We started also at Prado Dam a few years after we started Lake Mendocino. That's on the Santa Ana River in Southern California, Orange County, essentially. And we finished that final viability assessment in 2023. And then we just completed the one we're talking about here on Yuba Feather. And each of these concluded essentially that the forecasts are skillful enough to use the FERO concept in potential implementation through a water control manual update that ideally is forthcoming for each one. Go ahead. Here's a map of the areas that we're working on at this point, and you can see the Russian River to the west of Yuba Feather. You can see Yuba Feather and Prado Dam down in the LA area. And then also up in Seattle, we're working a reservoir there called Howard Hanson Dam. And then the Willamette River, we're just getting started on. And you can see highlights on the right-hand side there. The final viability assessment, or FVA, is complete at 3 of them. And the program is continuing to expand. Please go ahead. I want to describe for a moment the relationship between the FERO viability assessment and water control manual updates, which are 2 different things. On the left, you see a schematic of the process where the pyramid has these 3 levels, the top of which is the final viability assessment. How do we get there? We get there through a preliminary viability assessment, and if possible, a major deviation where operational changes can be tried out in real time at the discretion of the Corps of Engineers. And then the technical areas, the science and technology areas on the bottom tier there, meteorology, hydrology, ecosystem factors, and water resources operations. Those are the technical areas that are really the foundation of our whole evaluation effort. And then the word interim there is in case the final viability assessment shows viability, it's possible to propose a multi-year deviation from the standard operating procedures, and we refer that to as interim. And that is in place for both Mendocino and for Prado. And I'll show you some results in a moment from Mendo. It is not in place at the moment for Yuba Feather. Go ahead. And now this transitions into water control manual update studies that can take place to help support the deeper analysis that may be needed for specific water control manual update needs. Go ahead. And if the water control manual update when it's underway, it considers ideally the FERO concept in its calculations and considerations of all the different aspects that go into a water control manual update. Apologies here. Somehow there's a little construction going on in the next room over. I hope their drilling isn't interfering with you being able to hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we cannot hear it, so keep going.
Thank goodness. It is super loud in my office and very distracting. And you can see there the black curve is the reservoir storage, the normal top of conservation pool. And the red higher line is where, in the case of FERO, one could intrude into the flood control space temporarily if there's no storm coming and a storm just hit and no storm coming. We could keep water up to that level, and then the reservoir operator releases it if there's a storm predicted. That's where the forecasting comes in. And then similarly, the red area below is if it's effective and appropriate through the FERO viability assessment process. It shows whether dipping into the conservation pool ahead of a storm might actually improve flood risk management capacity. In other words, increase the empty space in the dam before a storm. That also is really forecast based. Okay, go ahead. We can skip that. Go ahead. Here are a few of highlights of really trying to distinguish the FERO final viability assessment and the water control manual update. So the FIRO viability assessment is conducted in parallel with water control manual updates in some cases or in sequence, and the viability assessment is a separate process. The FVA and the FIRO work is a research pilot project, and it explores a range of FIRO options. It is not a decisional document, and it is overseen by an interagency steering committee. Go ahead. During the WCM update, or the Water Control Manual update process, the Army Corps of Engineers identifies preferred alternatives and analyzes a full range of impacts and benefits. Go ahead. The WCM update is under the sole auspices of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It can be informed by the final viability assessment output, but is not bound by the FVA. Go ahead. It is also important to note that the FVA only analyzed scaled extreme events. The Water Control Manual update will include a more robust period of record analysis. So that's a concise summary of the differences between the FVA and the Water Control Manual update. Go ahead. A key factor for our assessments of the viability of FIRO in the Yuba Feather system is that one of the reservoirs, specifically New Bullards Bar, Yuba Water Agency has been developing plans to consider creating a new spillway called the Atmospheric River Control Spillway. And that is designed to maximize the benefits of FIRO and to better leverage improved forecasts. This extra spillway will allow for greater FIRO releases at lower reservoir levels at the reservoir. Essentially, the current release position is fairly high up on the reservoir, and to get an earlier start in releasing water as the reservoir is filling, it's possible to build a lower release point, and that's what this is about. And it would enable an additional 117,000 acre-feet of reservoir space to reduce water surface elevations and pressure on levees during high flow events, significantly reducing flood risk for Yuba County and other communities near the lower Yuba and Feather rivers. Okay, go ahead. So what's the stage of the Water Control Manual updates underway at the current FIRO watersheds? For Lake Mendocino, go ahead. There is a deviation in place that has been there since 2019, and it's been working very well. And the Water Control Manual update is very near completion. I can't say exactly when, but it should be a matter of months, ideally, from now. Go ahead. For Prado Dam, which we completed the FVA in 2023, a minor deviation has been in place since March, a couple of years after, year and a half after the FVA was done. And the Water Control Manual update process began just last year, and it is getting a good start right now. Go ahead. For the Yuba Feather system, the deviation status was to be determined, and then the Water Control Manual update that is being planned is going to consider FIRO final viability assessment recommendations. Go ahead. Let me turn just for a moment to really the key for FIRO success in Yuba Feather is the fact that atmospheric river storms have some good predictive skill. And first, I want to show what an AR, or atmospheric river, I'm going to call them ARs, looks like. This is a weather map showing a particular storm around New Year's Eve of 2023, or it was in December 31st, 2022. And the color fill is the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere, and the arrows are the wind direction and speed at about 5,000 feet above ground. And what you see there, close to the coast of California, you see very wet air. The green is wetter, and the arrows pointing straight into the coast and into the mountains. That's when we get the biggest precipitation from an AR, is when all that moisture is blowing straight up the mountain slope. Go ahead. This is what we see when we calculate when you multiply the water vapor content times the wind speed and direction, you get the vapor transport, or integrated vapor transport, we call it, or IVT. So it's essentially like the cubic feet per second or flow in a terrestrial river, but this is the flow of water vapor in the atmosphere. And yes, the red colors denote stronger flow, and the vectors give you the direction and intensity of that. And you can see how that's flowing straight into the coast there and into the Sierras. And this was a significant storm that sort of helped kick off the big events 2 years ago that caused flooding. Go ahead. Now we're zooming in. Those dashed lines are just zooming in to see the state of California. And this is a map from the California Nevada River Forecast Center of 24-hour precipitation. I'm sorry if you can't read the numbers on there, but the colors denote the amount of 24-hour total precipitation. And the blues and greens are, half an inch or an inch or so, pretty minor. But when you get into the reds and oranges, it's 3 to 5 inches. The yellows are up in the 6 to 7 inches and even 8 inches range. This was a very wet storm. And you can see the correlation just visually between where the AR hit and where the heaviest rain is. This is an iconic example of what we see a lot of times. There are some differences from case to case, but mostly where the AR hits is where you're going to get the heaviest precipitation. And if it stalls, that's when you can get into the flooding situation. Go ahead. We looked at back 40 years at FEMA data regarding flood damages, for which each case has a date and location and amount of damage. And we can then compare that with how much was there an atmospheric river present by looking at our catalog of AR events going back through those 40 years. And in this very important publication, Corringham et al., 2019, it shows that the vast majority of the flood damages in the West are from atmospheric river storms. Go ahead. And in particular, in the Northern California area, it's nearly 100% of the flood damages are as a result of atmospheric river storms. So this is largely why we focus on ARs. Go ahead. One way we strive to make AR forecasts better that I've led the development of is called atmospheric river airborne reconnaissance. And we take the Hurricane Hunter aircraft the nation has for hurricane prediction, which is a different time of year, and we use them over the Pacific in the winter. And you can see the tracks of our flights this last winter, including right out of Sacramento, also out of Hawaii, and then a couple of ones we tested out of Japan. We're trying to expand farther west because the farther west we get data, the longer the lead time in forecast improvement, because weather generally trends from west to east in the winter in this part of the world. So we've got a major program underway. Let's see what it looks like a little bit more. Go ahead. Go ahead. This is a schematic of what we're doing. You can see the translucent object there stretching from Hawaii in the bottom left of the diagram to the west coast on the upper or the middle right. And that translucent object looks a little bit like a slug maybe. It's the atmospheric river. It's relatively shallow, just a couple miles tall, but it's a couple hundred miles wide and maybe 1,000 or 2,000 miles long. And we use aircraft to fly across it over the top, and we drop little sensors in to measure the temperature, pressure, wind, and moisture. And those data then report back to the aircraft, which then sends it into the big data feed that goes into making weather forecasts better. And you can see a little bit of satellite information there. We also measure the ocean surface and subsurface, because all those conditions come together to influence the forecast and development of a storm, of an AR. And this work is making a lot of difference in making the forecast better for the last several years. Go ahead. It's also almost the same scope now as what the hurricane program has been doing for decades, using aircraft reconnaissance. Now come up almost to the same level of effort nationally as being dedicated towards our West Coast challenges with ARs, all partly motivated by the benefits and need for water supply and flood risk mitigation. Go ahead. And the substantial skill is appearing in the extreme events, in particular the big storms is where we're seeing very substantial amount of improved forecast on the order of 10 years worth of normal improvement rate we get by adding these new data in a given storm event. Go ahead. Another tool, this will be the most complicated diagram probably, is a forecast tool that we've developed here at our center that's used a lot. It's also posted on the CDEC webpage by DWR. And on the right, you see a map of the black dots are the locations for which the data in the left apply. So take a black dot there on the coast near San Francisco, for example, and let your eye go to the left, to the second panel, the leftmost panel. And when you first reach that blue area, that's 0 days lead time. That's like the current conditions. That first little swath or section from 0 to 1 is in the first day. And every 6 hours we represent, or 3 hours, we represent what the forecast of AR conditions is at that spot. So go a little farther left and you get to the first red box, the right edge of the first red box, and it goes purple. What that's saying is every one of the forecast models that we look at is showing an AR hitting that part of the coast. And then you can see that lasts about a day or day and a half, maybe even 2 days in some locations. That first red box identifies the first AR that hit 4 and 5 January of 2023. The next box is forecasted another AR. The fact it's not all purple means that some of the model forecasts didn't show an AR, but most of them did, and that looks pretty solid as a forecast. And then you see a third one from the 9th to 10th January, a fourth one from 12 to 13 January, and a fifth one to 14, 15 January. This diagram is meant to illustrate that we've been developing some very new forecast methods that are being adopted and used regularly. And we've quantified the fact that we can see these storms coming to a large degree 5 to 7 days ahead. It's not perfect exactly where they're going to hit, but it's possible to see whether there's one that could potentially hit nearby. And that's adequate and plenty good for the evaluations that we've done in the viability assessment here to conclude that FIRO is viable on the Yuba Feather system, including both reservoirs. Go ahead. Let's see what happened with implementation of FIRO through a major deviation on the Russian River at Lake Mendocino. Here we see from the year 2020, which was the third driest year on record for that basin, the December through May conditions at Lake Mendocino. The vertical axis is the storage in the reservoir. The dark gray is the traditional top of conservation pool. The light gray is what we call the FIRO or major deviation pool. That's the flexible space that FIRO has proposed can be used, and in the case of Lake Mendocino is being tested through this major deviation. And the thin dashed blue line represents the top of the FIRO pool. Because we have a climate where the weather really calms down in the spring and summer, we don't get flood risk really. You can see the reservoir is allowed to fill. The dark gray goes up towards May, where it ends up being full, and then you see the FIRO line going up sort of with it. And the red line shows what would have happened if FIRO had not been used by the operators to help make decisions each day. And the black curve shows what happened in reality because the operator did use FIRO concepts and tools. And at the end there, you see an 18% increase of water availability going into a very dry summer. That's enough water for 20 or 30,000 households for a year. Go ahead, let's see what happened in another year. That was a very dry year. This was a very wet year in 2023. And here we see that onslaught of ARs taking the very low water level at the beginning of the diagram on the left there. The black line is very low. It climbed up rapidly within 3 weeks and encroached half the flood pool. And the reservoir operator, used the reservoir to help take the crest off the flood. And then after the storm had hit there, you see that peak drops down to the top of the light dashed blue line. That's because the forecast showed there were no ARs coming. And for the next month or so, weather was quiet and the reservoir operator kept the water at that level. And then another storm came in the spring, there in March, and filled it a little bit, but there was another AR coming, so they released some of that, and they went back and forth on that. And then they carried up into the dry April enough water to represent a 13% increase over what would have been with FIRO, another roughly 20,000 to 30,000 households worth of water. So this is a proof in the pudding of how this works in the case of Lake Mendocino. Let's go ahead. And here's what happened last winter, this most recent winter, and you see the operator there bouncing around. That gray line is the top of the FIRO pool. Go ahead. The blue lines at the bottom there, that's the accumulated precipitation for the year, and the black arrows are the AR storms. Go ahead. And this diagram was from a little bit ago, and you can see it had about 10,000 acre-feet of additional water stored, and more water for the summer because of FIRO. Go ahead. And this is where it was about, I guess now a couple months ago, and it's continued to climb as you'd expect. So this is another example, very recent from this last winter on Lake Mendocino. Go ahead. But late FURO viability assessment and the Yuba feather is different. Let's turn to that for a moment here. And one of the big differences is that the big goal for the FURO study in Lake Mendocino was to help reduce drought problems by having the potential to keep extra water going into the summer. In the Yuba feather, the top priority was achieving testing the possibility of reducing flood risk, particularly given the big event that happened a few years ago. So this is a schematic of our approach, and it goes about 15 days from left to right. The green area is a storm that was predicted and happens in hypothetical space, and the storage and the vertical axis. The thin black line in the middle of the gray zone is this traditional top of conservation pool, and this applies to either New Bullards Bar or Oroville. And the dashed blue line shows the water supply or the water level before the storm was forecast. And that blue arrow in the upper left is the pre-event time period of 10 days. We're watching the FURO method says carry a bit extra water in the reservoir until you see a forecast of an AR, and then you have time to release it. So about 5 days out, you start to see the dashed blue line go down. That's based on seeing a forecast of an AR, and the reservoir operators have time to release water ahead of the storm. And now you see that dip down to the bottom where the lowest part of the dashed blue line goes is at the bottom of the FURO pool, which is encroaching into conservation pool. And that's essentially opening up extra space for flood risk management that would otherwise not be available. Then you see the blue curve jump up during the forecasted storm, and you see it go up above the FURO pool, but it's still well within the range of the dam's capacity. And then after the storm, post-event, the reservoir operator drops that water level back down to the top of the FURO space. And this illustrates how this FURO approach in our viability assessment essentially showed that by using forecasts of ARs, the accuracy in those forecasts is good enough now to enable this approach to be done. And we tested it at both New Bullards Bar and Oroville, and we did it for two big storms, 1986 and 1987. And we used different versions of options we came up with for FURO, in the technical details. And let me show you that next. Go ahead. So this was an event we took the 1986 storm, and to represent the risk that there could be bigger storms in the future, we scaled up that actual event by 16%. So it's substantially bigger than what actually happened. And in the figure here, what we see is a period from February 7 to February 25, so about 18 days. And this is our analysis. This is hypothetical. And what you see in the vertical axis is the elevation of the New Bullards Bar storage. And it's illustrative of similar things happened at Oroville. And let me draw your attention to the black curve, the solid black curve. That is what would happen without FURO and what happened. And you see the dashed line where that black curve, flattens out is the top of the gross pool at New Bullards Bar. And what you see below that is the next dashed line horizontal is the top of FURO space. And notice the blue and red lines on the left, which are two different FURO technical, options, different ways of doing FURO. Both the blue and red lines were coming in at the top of the FURO space, just like my schematic on the previous slide. And then the forecast came, and you could see the FURO operations take place and drop the water level down to the bottom dashed line, which is the bottom of the FURO space. And both FURO methods, the blue and the red ones, got down to that level. And then when the storm hit, there was much more capacity for the reservoir to absorb that flood. And you see, as the blue and red lines climb, the top level they get is well below the black line. That's showing that there's substantial extra space, over 10 feet and 15 feet almost in the case of the red line, 10 feet in the case of the blue line, less water level in the reservoir, less water. And then when the storm ended, that water was released down to the top of the FURO pool where the blue and red lines are going horizontal, and the black line then drops back to the standard conservation pool if FURO wasn't used. So go ahead. Let me just, I went through that without doing the animation. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so another point I want to make is regard to releases. increased releases before the event, still relatively low releases, then allowed for the peak release that would have happened to be lower as well, because you've basically used a longer period of time to release the water the flood was going to produce. And then faster reductions of high releases, meaning that the levees have less time exposed to high water. Go ahead. And in the totality of the two reservoirs operated together, a combination of 90,000 acre feet of additional FERO space at New Bullards Bar and 170,000 at Oroville combined to 260,000 acre feet of additional capacity for flood risk management. That's our formal conclusion from the FERO viability assessment. Let me just do a couple slides with very detailed quotes from our study. FERO is viable at Oroville and New Bullards Bar. Go ahead. The strategy reductions in downstream flood flows and peak reservoir elevation across all scale factors. That's that 16% boost I told you about. We looked at different scale factors as well, are attributable to the use of the forecasts, to FERO space that extends into the water conservation pool, and the presence of the planned arc spillway. Even without the arc spillway, there were benefits. It is recommended that the forecast be incorporated into the water control manual updates. This is our maiden recommendation to the folks who will carry out the water control manual update, that this FERO approach could be incorporated. Go ahead. And for the scenarios tested, FERO with the arc spillway enhances flood risk mitigation capacity by roughly 260,000 acre feet. Go ahead. Heavy precipitation in the watershed is driven by atmospheric rivers. Go ahead. Landfalling ARs are predicted with lead times of about 5 to 7 days. Go ahead. 24-hour total volume flows into the reservoirs are skillful out to about 6 days lead time. Go ahead. Post-event storages were consistently higher than pre-FERO storages. There could be a water supply benefit pending a full analysis in the water control manual update. Go ahead. I'll close with that and just point you to the Scientific American article from a couple of years ago that summarizes in fairly common language some of the concepts that we've talked about here today about ARs. It talks about the AR scale, which I didn't really cover today, about AR recon, and about FERO. I'll close there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Ralph. Lots of really good information there. I'm going to turn it to our fellow commissioners and see if there are any questions. And I see Supervisor Stevens. Go ahead.
Yes, one question I have actually two questions. One question is there any way to tell if a storm is going to stall? Do you have any information on that? And I'll just give you my other question. Have you seen any situations where FERO just did not work at all?
Yeah, good, very good questions. And on the first one, yes, the stalling of the ARs is really one of the key causes for flooding in the West Coast. And it is one of the major things we're working on to improve forecasts of. So we have the AR recon missions I told you about. Mm-hmm. Those help with that because over the ocean is where the what we call a mesoscale frontal wave forms, and it ripples along the AR and can cause this AR to stall. Without the AR recon data, that's harder to predict. The model still predicted a bit, but not as accurately. So we focus a lot on the forecasting of the stalling. We also have we have the weather models themselves allow us to look for that structure and that behavior. And we've looked at many cases now, and we're getting a good handle on when that's likely to happen and where.
Okay.
Your second question, I'm trying to recall.
If you just had any circumstances where it just didn't work at all, where your information just didn't pan out.
That's a really interesting point. And in reality, we're sort of waiting to find that. It's been working pretty well in our studies. We think it's because largely, sorry, let me come back to the cleaner answer. When we look at the forecast skill for extreme precipitation, which is, what drives the floods, and we look at it nationally, we see that the West Coast has the most skillful forecasts for heavy rain. And there's two main reasons. One is it's atmospheric river storms, which they're more predictable than tropical storms and hurricanes, and more predictable than big thunderstorms, which often cause the flooding in the Great Plains, for example. And one of our great advantages is we have the mountains, and the mountains don't really move, other than a joke about an earthquake. But when it comes to the weather, those mountains are what forces the air in the atmospheric river to go up. And that's when you get clouds and precipitation to form the most. In flat places like the Great Plains or much of the East Coast, you don't have that, fixed area of mountains to push the air up. And you depend on the dynamics of the fluid to cause the air to go up in different ways, which is much harder to predict. So we have two huge advantages on the West Coast. And we think that's largely why these studies have shown such good results.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. Okay, I see Commissioner Bateman with his hand up. And you've got to hit unmute. We're not hearing you yet. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
In the past, there's been a wetness index in Oroville, used in Oroville Dam. Has that got any role in the FARO system?
It's not an explicit parameter in the FARO methods that are recommended because the methods use hydrologic models to predict the inflow into the reservoir and the conditions from the previous storms. If there's been previous storms that have made the soil really moist, that actually is factored in. But no, it's not a specific parameter in the evaluations.
And so you're not recommending that be used in the water control manual because it's not very scientific in relation to FARO.
I don't think we recommended not using it, but we recommended incorporating the forecast.
And then also the second question is, I gather that in the FARO final report, the date on which the reservoir can be filled is being advanced to the 1st of March as opposed to the 1st of April. Is that correct?
The beginning of fill, I think, is allowed to start earlier. I'd have to look back at that carefully.
But if that's the case, the rainfall at my gauge in March is immensely more than in April, and that obviously would increase the risk of something unexpected happening. I mean, this one year was 21 inches in March.
Yeah, that's an understandable concern, in my opinion. And the use of the forecast information is what mitigates that, because we can see these storms coming enough to get the water out of harm's way.
Yeah, what the FARO seems to make all sorts of sense with the early release particularly. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Commissioner Bateman. And Supervisor Stevens, do you have another question, or is that a remnant hand?
Sorry, that's a remnant hand.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions from commissioners? Feel free to just unmute and jump in if you didn't find the raise hand question here. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ralph. Really appreciated that presentation. I learned a lot myself, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We are going to turn to our next presenter. This kind of refers back to past commission presentations where we've heard in past meetings an interest in how Department of Water Resources forecasts inflows into the reservoir, including how they account for snowpack melt. So Department of Water Resources relies heavily on forecasting products from the California Nevada River Forecast Center. And that's a collaborative effort between National Weather Service and DWR. So today we have with us Bibek Joshi, manager of the River Forecasting Unit at DWR. And he'll walk us through the process of how they forecast reservoir inflows. Before I hand it over to Bibek, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the federal partners involved in this and really their essential role. And they're now working under immense staffing and resourcing shortages from recent cuts. And we appreciate their continued partnership. The National Weather Service delivers these vital forecasts to the state via the California Nevada River Forecast Center that enables us to operate our reservoirs more safely. We had hoped to have the National Weather Service staff with us today to be able to talk about their work, but they don't have sufficient staff at the time to join us. So DWR is here who works closely with them in partnership, and they'll be describing the forecasting process. So I'm going to turn it over to Vivek to cover this next topic. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity. As mentioned, this presentation is about providing an overview of river and reservoir inflow forecasting in California. You might have used the California Nevada River Forecast Center various products, the forecast products. So in this presentation, I try to show what are the different processes that goes behind creating those forecast products. So there are two parts of this presentation. In the first half, I'll be talking about the different river and reservoir inflow forecasting products. And in the second half, which will be a little bit more technical, I'll talk about the snowmelt modeling, how the CNRFC model handles the snowmelt modeling, and especially rain on snow events. So yeah, next slide. So this slide has animation, so you can hit like next. So as mentioned earlier, river forecasting, reservoir inflow forecasting in California is a joint state and federal partnership. So we have both the federal and the state working together in issuing this forecast. So there is a joint project agreement that clearly defines what each agency brings to this partnership and how the resources are shared. So let's look at the federal side. So you have California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is a part of National Weather Service. And within the National Weather Service is also a part of, you can hit next and continue to hit next. And CNRFC is a part of the National Weather Service. And National Weather Service in itself is one of the various agencies under National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. So that's the federal side. And on the state side, we have California Department of Water Resources, which is a part of California Natural Resources Agency. And within the Department of Water Resources, the actual river forecasting is done by Division of Flood Operations. You can hit next. And in this presentation, we'll be focusing mostly on the California Nevada River Forecast Center and their various forecasting products. Next slide. So here I want to show the CNRFC modeling domain. The CNRFC is one of the 13 RFCs in the country. And the CNRFC covers California, most of Nevada, and lower portion of Oregon. There are two major services provided by the CNRFC. One is the short-range flood forecasting services, and the other one is the long-range water supply forecasting. And in this presentation, I will be focusing on the short-range flood forecasting. So as mentioned, the modeling domain covers a big area. So it's 245,000 square miles. So that's a big area to cover. It could be easily size of a mid-sized country. So there are 350 basins modeled within the modeling domain. Right now, there are 102 official forecast points that has official flood and monitor stages. We also model, there are 102 reservoir inflows forecasted every day. And then there are 173 other forecast points, which can be just the computation points in the model, or some of these points were requested by different stakeholders because they might want to monitor a levee during high water event, or those might be environmental flow monitoring stations. So those are the unofficial forecast points, and there are 173 of those. Next slide, please. River forecasting is a year-round operation. So there's at least one forecast issued every day. And broadly, the operations can be divided into the winter operations and summer operations. So during summer operation, which is from mid-April to October, we issue one forecast a day. So the forecast is issued by 9 a.m. in the morning. And the winter operations start from November 1st to mid-April. So during the winter operations, we issue two forecasts, one in the morning by 9 a.m. and one in the afternoon by 3 p.m. So that's during the weekdays. And on the weekends, one forecast in the morning by 9 a.m. And during the winter is when we get different atmospheric event, extreme precipitation events. So when that happens, we switch into the flood operations. So when we switch to flood operations, depends upon what the watershed response is. If you have multiple locations forecast to exit monitor or flood stays, then we ramp up our flood forecasting. And then we start adding the evening forecast, which is by 9 p.m. And during an extreme event, the CNRFC is open 24 hours. And then we also issue the midnight or the post-midnight, the 3 a.m. forecast. So during flood operations, the forecasters issue the forecast. And after the forecasts are issued, then they are monitoring the hydrologic and meteorological conditions and update the forecast as necessary. Next slide, please. So here, again, another animation, so you can keep hitting next. Just wanted to show what are the different models that are used by CNRFC. So there are two major models that the CNRFC uses. So those are the SNO 17 and Sacramento Soil Moisture Accounting Model. So both models were developed by National Weather Service with river forecasting in mind. SNO 17 is the snow accumulation and snowmelt model. It simulates snowpack evolution and estimate snowmelt runoff. So it estimates the timing and magnitude of snowmelt. It also includes the rain on snow events, and which we'll talk about later in the presentation. And SAC SMA is the hydrologic precipitation runoff model that estimates how precipitation is transformed into runoff. Then you need to consider the soil moisture, the evapotranspiration, and how the water moves on the subsurface level as well. So that's the two major models. And then we have additional smaller sub-models or routines that helps the SNO 17 and SAC SMA. So one of them is the rain snow elevation routine that determines if the precipitation is falling as rain or snow. The output of SNO 17 and SAC SMA is called rain and melt. So that's the amount of precipitation excess on the soil surface, and that needs to be routed downstream to generate a hydrograph. So that is done by a routing module, and most of the watersheds in California are regulated. So we have a reservoir model that takes into account the different reservoir regulation and prescribes the releases downstream. So in any hydrologic models, you need the observed data. So considering the size of the CNRFC domain, the forecaster has to look into like numerous rain gauges. So right now there are 1,200 plus rain gauges that gets fed into the model. There are 600 plus air temperature sensors, 500 plus river gauges, 120 plus reservoir stays and releases, and then you need also add the freezing label. So those are the observed data that gets fed into the model and informs the model about what is the current condition of the watershed. So what is the snowpack right now? What are the river stages, reservoir elevations? And on top of that, you add the forecast inputs, which are the precipitation, temperature, and freezing level forecast. So once you add this forecast, then you get the hydrographs, the forecast. And then on the output side, there are two major outputs. One is the deterministic forecast, which is one most likely outcome. And then there's also an ensemble or probabilistic forecast that provides a range of forecast and we will talk about each of these type of forecasts in the next two slides. So next slide, please. So deterministic forecast, it's one single best estimate prediction. So it answers, so this is a model telling what is the most likely outcome. And this is just based on one weather forecast, one model run, and one set of initial conditions. So for an example, Consumnes River at Michigan Bar, the forecast might be 12.1 feet on a particular day at particular time. So that's a deterministic forecast. In terms of reservoir inflow, it could be the total volume in the next 5 days. So again, one value. So that's the deterministic forecast. And next slide. And compare that to that ensemble forecast. So with ensemble forecast, it provides the possible outcomes and the range of outcomes. And not only that, it attaches probability for each possible outcomes. So it captures a range of possible outcomes. And right now, all the uncertainty in the CNRFC model are based on the weather side, on the meteorological conditions. So instead of one possible outcomes, now there are 44 different model runs. So as you can see on the graph there, you have a different range of the forecast on the graph, and on the right you can also see the probability that can happen. So again, sticking with the same example, the stays at Michigan Bar, the forecast exceeding 7 feet might be a 50% chance, but there's a very high probability that it will exceed 7 feet. A 50% chance it will exceed 12 feet. 95% chance that it will exceed 7 feet. So 7 feet might be a threshold that the emergency personnel might be interested in, so that they can deploy the resources there. So it's for risk-informed decision making. So this is a very good information to have. Next slide. Here we'll switch gear, and then I'll talk more into the snowmelt methods, how the CNRFC model handles snowmelt. So we'll talk about the Snow 17 model, and then one particular type of event, which is the rain snow event, and how the CNRFC model computes the rain on snow event. Next slide. So Snow 17 is the model that computes the snowmelt, how the snowmelt evolves during the winter and the spring season, how the snow pack accumulates during the accumulation period, and then how the snow melts during the late spring, early summer months. So Snow 17 is, again, it was developed by National Weather Service. It is an index model. It is a conceptual model. By conceptual model, it means it still takes into account all the physical processes, but then it's in a simplified form. So the Snow 17 model uses air temperature as the proxy to determine all the energy exchange that happens between the snow-air interface and also between the snow and soil interface. The graphs here just to show what are the different actual physical processes that goes behind any snowmelt modeling. You have this various radiation transfer occurring between the two surfaces. You have to take into account the humidity, the wind, vegetation cover, and also the interaction between the snow and the soil beneath it. So what the Snow 17 does, it includes all those processes, but then simplifies so that it's easier to compute. Next slide. Again, so the input to the models are air temperature, precipitation, and freezing level. So those are the inputs to the Snow 17 model. And then the output is rain plus melt. So it's what is the total amount of precipitation and snow melt excess on the soil surface. And after that, there's a different routing model that routes that precipitation excess into a hydrograph and then routes downstream. The other output includes the water equivalent. So how much, if you melt the snowpack, how much water will you get So that's the water equivalent. It also outputs the snow depth, and it also simulates the snow cover within the watershed. Next slide. So again, the inputs are temperature, precipitation, and freezing level. It includes all the physical processes, but with some assumption added so that the computation is easier and quicker to compute. So Snow 17 has two modules. There's the temperature index melt runoff and then rain on snow runoff. So and how the Snow 17 goes between these two modules is dependent upon how much rain is falling. And I'll talk about these two modules in the next slide. And one of the advantages of using Snow 17 is it's very interactive. The forecasters can press different or switch different knobs so that the simulation is always close to what the data is showing from the field. So on the watersheds, you have snow pillow, snow courses that has the data. And if the model is deviating, if it's over simulating or under simulating, the forecasters can always change and make modification so that the model is simulating is not that far away from the reality. And Snow 17 has that advantage compared to other models, that it's easier to adjust the model. And yeah, so every month during the winter months, the forecasters look at the actual data from the field and then true up the model. So fine tune the model so that the point observations that you are getting from the field are input into the model so that the model stays within that band of reality and doesn't deviate too far away. Next slide. So this is to show how the actual process is done. So it's a quantitative process. So all the snow sensors, snow pillow, snow courses data from the watersheds are fed into a regression equation, and that regression equations provides the information to the forecasters. Is the model, the simulation from the model, is that close to what's being observed on the field or not? So if it's not, then the forecasters can easily add or remove snow from the model. So that helps with the short-term rain event as well as the long-term, let's say April to July runoff as well. Next slide. So this is where I want to focus on the two modes that Snow 17 has, which is rain on snow mode and non-rain melt mode. So the non-rain melt mode can be considered as without rain or a sunny day melt. So how does the model handles when there is no rain? So the way the Snow 17 differentiates these two different mode is, if the precipitation falling within the next 6 hours is less than 1.5 millimeter, so that's just a trace amount of precipitation, then the computation is based on the non-rain melt mode. So in that non-rain melt mode, it uses a melt factor, which is based on empirical relations. And it uses that melt factor and any trace amount of rain to compute the melt. But when the precipitation is more than 1.5 millimeter in the next 6 hours, then it switches to the rain on snow mode. And rain on snow mode is a complicated process. You have to take into consideration the warm rain falling on the snow. You also need to consider the humid condition that will help enhance the melt, because as the vapor on that atmosphere or the air and snow surface is condensating, it will add additional energy to the snowpack. So that will add to the snow melt. And you also need to consider overcast conditions and what's the long wave radiation changes there. If there's windy, which the model takes into account, it will speed up that process as well. So the rain on snow mode handles that. And there's a complete set of equation that the Snow 17 uses to compute the rain on snow event. Next slide. So this is to show the dry melt condition. What is the melt factor used in the model? So you can see during the winter months, the melt factor is lower, and for starting March, April, the melt factor used in the model speeds up. Next slide. So just to summarize, like what I mentioned about rain on snow, so it's a complex process. You need to consider many variables. You have the temperature and snowpack conditions, obviously, but then the humidity, the wind speed, vegetation cover. So that all takes into adds to the additional melt from the rain. And usually the strongest component is the turbulent transfer. So this is when there's a vapor gradient between the atmosphere and the snowpack. And with additional wind, it will enhance that process. And the Snow 17 model considers that. And some of the simulations that we have run shows that the snow melt to rain ratio can be as high as 25%. And there's a relationship, there's a function that computes this. So 25% it can add, and if the air temperature is high, if it's even warmer rain, sometimes it can go above 25% as well. But on the other side, rain on snow doesn't always mean there will be melt, because if the snowpack is deep, if its snowpack is still cold, if there's a negative energy balance on the snowpack, even if you add the warm rain, it will increase the temperature of the snowpack, but that alone might not be able to melt the snowpack. So there's obviously two sides to our rain on snow event. Next slide. So this is my final slide, just to summarize everything. So the flood forecasting products that the CNRFC issues, it includes both the deterministic, the best estimate, or it also provides the ensemble, the range of estimates. The two models that CNRFC uses, the SAC SMA and Snow 17, they are conceptual models. So they use, they consider the physical process, but then they simplify it for the computational purposes. And one of the advantages of using the conceptual models is models are, it's easier to fine tune, easier to calibrate, and our forecasters continuously calibrate during the forecasting operations and outside the forecasting operations to inform the hydrologic models and keep them updated. And on the rain on snow, it can add up to 25% snow melt to rain ratio in very warm events. So that's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Vivek. Really appreciate it. Do we have questions from commissioners? Okay, great. I see Mayor Pittman first.
Yeah, thank you. A wonderful presentation. I really appreciate the one thing that caused the 97 event at our family cabin up at the first lake on the South Fork of the Feather River. We had 4.5, 5 feet of snow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Warm rain came in, and by 6 o'clock that evening, the snow was gone. So your modeling is really appreciated and appropriate to all the factors that came in, because that was a very warm rain that came in, and just the worst of situations, circumstances. I'm wondering if it might be helpful if we actually had stream gauges in those rivers to help us, see the actual water flow from the snow melt. Your modeling is really impressive in terms of figuring that out, but I'm just wondering if we had stream gauges in all those upper rivers, it might help us also forecast the flood conditions.
Yeah, if you're talking about further upstream of Oroville, there are numerous river gauges that computes that shows like what is the river stage and the flow. So there is on the Middle Fork there are 2 gauges. There's one on the Indian River. There's one on the Indian Creek, Spanish Creek, and on the North Fork, there are numerous gauges by PG&E. So Feather is pretty well covered in terms of stream gauging.
Well, that's good to know. I think 97 is kind of our gold standard in terms of flood operations, because it certainly was more water than anybody had ever predicted. And it was disconcerting at the 5,000 foot level to have that much snow and be gone in less than an 8 or 10 hour period was pretty impressive. And I appreciate how your system takes a look at all the factors in that. That's very comforting to know about. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Pittman. Let's go to Commissioner Bateman. I think I saw you next.
Can we hear that?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Are there methods of measuring the accuracy of your snowmelt forecasts, and is that reported anywhere?
So if you go to the CNRFC page, they have a forecast verification. So they verify their every forecast. I think it goes back to 2011.
And how accurate have they been?
Right now, I don't think they have like quantify like what is the accuracy there, but the actual forecast and the actual observed data, that information is publicly available.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Bateman. Okay, we've got Supervisor Stevens.
Yes, very good information. I was just wondering, this information sounds like and looks like it would go well with our previous speaker. Do you guys work any together in coming up with these different models?
Looks like Dr. Ralph, we've got you back on as well.
Yeah.
If you want to jump in, either of you.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivek, if you'd like. I'm happy to add.
Yeah, I mean, I know Dr. Ralph, so we work very closely. We have a pretty good relationship with CW3. So we work both on the operations and research. CW3 is more focused on the research, DWR and CNRFC on the operations. So what we have been doing is because research is always a few steps ahead of actual operations. So we get all these advanced technologies, processes from CW3, and then try to implement in our day-to-day operations.
Thanks, Vivek. I'll add to that the working with the DWR and CNRFC teams has been really central to our work in CW3. We learn a lot from their experience on how things are working well and less well. And we bring to the table some innovative ideas that might not otherwise be apparent. And we've taken it so far as to actually embed 2 of our CDB3 staff are physically embedded with the operations folks so as to learn from them and to help convey some of the innovative stuff and to support operations where that makes sense. So it's a really good relationship and really looking forward to continuing and growing that.
Great. It looks like it works well together.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, great to hear about that collaboration. Other questions from commissioners or? Okay. Well, thanks so much to you both for really informative presentations today and helping us understand, how forecasting works, what the cutting edge science is in terms of operating the reservoir, and the collaborations that you all have to, make that happen both in real time, but also to push the science forward for future improvements. So thanks so much. Okay, before we open the floor to public questions, I wanted to discuss the upcoming agenda topics. So the commission will continue to address topics as they come up on our action tracker. Yeah, thanks, James, for perfect. Thanks for bringing that back up. So the commission will continue to address topics on the action tracker, as well as circling back to topics on which DWR provides recurring annual updates. So the 2 topics that we are proposing for October's meeting are report outs that have been requested by the commission here to receive annually. So the first one, the annual budget and project prioritization update, and the second one, the dam safety update. We do a regular process where we propose the agenda topics and circulate the action tracker and then solicit your feedback. So we'll be looking for that feedback after this meeting by July 11th. Is there any feedback at this time? Okay. All right, in the coming weeks, we'll share that agenda and provide the opportunity for additional input. Oh, I do see a hand up. Okay, Supervisor Connolly, go ahead.
Could we please have the agenda at least a week in advance so we could look it over?
Okay.
Thank you.
Tara, what's our usual cadence, Tara, that we're doing? Can you remind us what our process is for sharing agenda and making sure folks are informed and prepared?
Yes, so the draft agenda we try to get out a week after this meeting and then request feedback. And then the final agenda, our goal is really to get it posted online a month before this meeting. But you know what we can do a better job at is emailing to notify all of you that it is posted. So we'll make sure that that happens consistently, Supervisor.
Perfect. Okay. Good. Thanks for bringing that up, Supervisor Connolly. Okay, let's open the floor to public comment. James, do we do a slide for that? Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, let's open the floor to public comment. So if you'd like to make a comment, please click the raise hand button, and then I'll call on you in the order that I see the hands come up on the Zoom platform. You can also provide written comments through the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. Each person will have 3 minutes to provide a comment. And then after we've heard from all the verbal commenters, our meeting planner will read out any comments that we got in the Q&A function. So let me just pull up the participant list here, and I will wait for any raised hands.
Is Matt going to ask anything?
There we go. Okay, go ahead, James, if you can manage bringing, it looks like we have Matt Mentek with a hand up.
You should be able to unmute Matt.
Thank you. Interesting information. You know, for people who are not familiar with the process, who may have just joined the commission, I think it might even been a bit overwhelming. For those who have been with the commission, with the Department of Water Resources through their comprehensive needs assessments and the 8 years since the spillway incident, I think it may have missed the target. First question would be for Marty Ralph. Did you receive a 9-page memo on like 5 different topics that resulted from like 100 hours of researching your final viability report? I think 11 of those questions of the 35 or so questions were for you to answer in today's meeting.
Matt, let me just jump in and speak also broadly to the process here, because I know that I received those questions and that they were distributed to the presenters, and actually I think very helpful to have the presenters be able to look at, you know, what they might be able to address in the time allotted in the time for our meeting here today, and just knowing that there may be ones that are not fully addressed. And that there's, you know, an opportunity for us to follow up in more detail after this meeting, if you're finding that that's the case.
Yeah, well, what we find is that the text of the bill that authorized this commission asks that the downstream community members submit their questions and concerns to be addressed at the commission meetings. And what we're finding is that we get these presentations of presenters that don't really address the essence of our concerns. We were asked what we would like for this next meeting. We spent hundreds of hours researching the fire report. We submitted our questions 5 weeks in advance. We asked that the agenda be the questions and not in addition to their prefab presentation that's geared more towards like an Oroville community update meeting. I think we've moved beyond that for the amount of years that we've been working together, and that we would like to find a way in which we could have our questions actually answered. In the past, there's been some good sidebar meetings in which they're answered outside of the commission meetings, but we got this 3-year report coming up, and I think this is probably point number 1 on things that we could be doing better. And I want this to be put on the action tracking log, that questions submitted is the essence of the commission, and it should be the priority focus when we have presenters answering the concerns. To have the scientific knowledge is one thing, to know how it applies to Oroville is another thing, and we missed the boat there. So how can we get these 37 questions answered for the public to know how we're going to be affected by this new water control manual update before Army Corps of Engineers makes their selection, and it's virtually impossible to get any change done after that. We're trying to get ahead of the train leaving the station here, and I don't think we accomplished any of that today.
Thanks for your feedback, Matt. I know what we can commit to here. John, I'll just pull you in to confirm that DWR can follow up for a more detailed conversation around some of those questions, but also knowing that we have a broader group here and kind of time to manage as well. So I think that's natural for some of that to flow into a more detailed conversation.
It appears that we are that. It appears that the meeting is choosing what they want to discuss and dodging the things that they don't feel comfortable discussing. We created a very clear narrative, very direct line of questioning, and it was ignored.
Yeah, Deputy Secretary, I think that your suggestion is a good one to follow on with the separate meeting. We can get into the even further detail, and to the extent the questions that the presenters received, that the answers weren't as clear there, we can do that through some follow-on discussions. We'd be happy to do that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Deputy Director. Let's see, do we have any other public comments before we go back to commissioners?
No other hands raised currently.
And no written comments.
Okay, thanks, Tara. Okay, let's go back to commissioners here. I see a hand from Commissioner Bateman. Go ahead.
Yes, we submitted questions to a bunch of the people involved in the whole process, water control processing, and we have answered for Yuba River. And I had, to be fair, the DWR have offered to have another session discussion, a side meeting, and I think that should be under the auspices of the commission. So it's reported in the commission minutes. And I'm hoping that will be after we've got replies to our questions from the Corps of Engineers, which we hope they promised it for next week. Actually, they couldn't make it this week. And so if we could have a meeting in 2 or 3 weeks with the DWR, perhaps Mr. Ralph could be available. I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Bateman. Okay, I saw Supervisor Connolly.
Yeah, I'd like to back up Matt and Commissioner Bateman. I wish Matt was a commissioner. He spends an extraordinary amount of time getting into the details and actually comes up with really issues that should be directly brought up in these meetings. And it's nothing against your presentations. It's just that we spend a lot of time listening, and then the answers that the hard questions aren't answered. And if we have a sidebar, there's really no record. And I just want to politely say there's a few things that weren't addressed today. There isn't a lower outlet at Lake Oroville. They've only been flying out in the Pacific for a few years, less than a decade from the last report we had. And even though he says that we can rely on those forecasts uh, more than you can the ones in the Caribbean over hurricanes in the Atlantic, so forth, uh, we want public safety to be a priority here. And so our input isn't being taken as seriously as we like it was. In other words, let me put it, I'm pretty blunt. I mean, we'd rather you err on the side of public safety over water delivery while you spend a decade or more flying out into the Pacific and telling us how good you are. And he's a great guy and gave a great presentation, but he did actually admit that there's holes in this. They've never had a real stall of a storm and so forth. And I'm not here to be disparaging on anybody. I'm here to just urge, listen to us because we have input. The mayor told you about how much snow melted that one time. And then it was really news to me, good news, that we have stream gauges. We've been told for the last decade the only way we knew how much inflow was coming into the lake was we measured how fast it came up, which left a big gap in our knowledge of which stream was contributing to the rise of the lake and then the downstream pressures. And another thing that we're going to have to address in the future, since I'm on a roll here, is that Oroville's levee has to be fixed. And it's going to take more than platitudes and being nice. I mean, somebody's going to have to come up with some money, because if you want to deliver water or you want to spill water, it has to safely go through the city of Oroville, which is in my district. And beyond that, we have to look at the levees and how much pressure they can take, because some of the projections we found have been completely off. Like, for instance, Highway 70 is not a levee. It's a highway with holes in it, and it's very permeable, and it's water table dry comes on one side and the other. I mean, there's a lot of local issues here that we'd like addressed during the meeting. These sidebars would be fine if they're Brown Act or if they're public and there's a record of it, I'll support it. And I am not the scientific mind that Matt is, nor Robert Bateman. I just know that these men are correct, and what they come up with are legitimate questions, and I urge them to be asked and answered in a public manner. That's why I asked about the agenda, because the last agenda was quite late on these issues, and then they weren't addressed during it. And again, for all the cooperation with DWR and the resources, I'd like to see that continue, but I also like to take this seriously, because in the past, after something's issued, like the license for the dam or recreation or anything, it's too late to make input. We're trying to be in front of the curve, and our frustration is living here our entire life. That is the way we've been treated. Like, okay, you can talk after we decide what we're going to do, and then it's hard to change what happened. So those are my comments, and God bless you all. You know, I'm not angry. I would like to see a change in this. These questions should be answered during the meeting, more than you drone on and talk to us. Answer our questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Supervisor Connolly, and definitely hearing that important emphasis on public safety that I think is really shared here. And I do just want to confirm in previous ad hoc that were kind of in more depth about the questions that Department of Water Resources received, those responses have been posted to the commission website. So that's a good resource and a kind of ability to communicate that broadly to the group as well. But thank you so much for comments. Okay, I see Supervisor Stevens. Go ahead.
Okay, forgive me, I'm rather new here, so I'm sure there's a lot of things going on that I don't realize. But I've wondered, is there your agency or any other agency that grades the safety of the dams, and where does Oroville fall into that? If there is, I would assume there is. Can you give me any information on that?
Yeah, good question. Deputy Director Yarborough, can I ask you to speak to that topic?
Yeah, so the safety of the dams, they're graded by the Division of Safety of Dams. So they issue a different grading for all of the different facilities throughout the state there. our deputy director over both the flood management and dam safety. She, I think previously we had the Division of Safety Dams come into the commission and present about their process on how they do that. So, so yes, there is a process for that.
And what is the safety level of Oroville? Do you have it?
It is, I have our lead dam safety engineer, David Sarkeesian, here to confirm this. I believe it is so I get the note here, satisfactory is how it's rated on the scale there. So, and David can confirm that and can elaborate there.
Yeah, that's correct. And I believe DSOD revisits their ratings every year. And so I'll double check and make sure it hasn't changed.
Is that where most dams fall into, or is Oroville above or below, or just that's kind of average?
Yeah, that's like the top rating. And so there's ratings below that. So yeah, most dams are at satisfactory, but when DSOD identifies a deficiency, they'll reduce it to fair. If they find multiple deficiencies, they'll downgrade it to let's see, what is it? Poor. So and then below that would be unsatisfactory. And at that point, they're probably putting a restriction on the reservoir. So there's basically 4 levels.
Okay. So it's at its highest level.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Supervisor Stevens. Okay. I'm just checking for any other. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, with no further questions and comments, it sounds like there's a action item for a more in-depth conversation that Department of Water Resources will facilitate. And just referencing folks back to those posted previous responses, appreciate the concerns and feedback that we've heard here today. And also just want to confirm that sending those questions in advance actually, I think, were helpful and were helpful in informing the presentations. But look forward to that follow-up. Okay, like I said at the top of the meeting, our next Citizens Advisory Commission meeting is planned for October. So the date is still being confirmed. You'll see that soon. And I will send out a calendar hold for commissioners. And we'll update that on the website as well as soon as we land on that date. I will also be circulating more information to commissioners on the opportunity to join the floating classroom, which we're planning for that same day and intend to have right after the commission meeting in October. So with that, we are adjourned, and I want to thank you all for joining today. Have a great weekend.